Mystix プレゼンツ
This rare-ass 85 Toyota van is now a Mystix tour van.
Vintage Cruis'N USA
On this episode of Vintage Cruis'N USA, I'll be going on a hiking trail where 3 brutal murders took place. Wait, how did I get here? I was having a wine tasting at a local winery in Utica, Illinois with my family. The owner's girlfriend, who had happened to be enjoying a tasting, told us that we should go visit the St. Louis Canyon. We were told that there was an interesting history behind the trail. When I researched the trail, I learned about its bloody history. The trail is located in Starved Rock State Park, already the name deriving from a Native American legend. In the 1760s, Chief Pontiac of the Ottawa tribe attended a tribal council meeting. At this council of the Illinois and Potawatomi, Kinebo, the head chief of the Illinois tribe, stabbed Chief Pontiac. Afterwards, a great battle started. The Illinois, fearing death, took refuge on a great rock. After many days, the remaining Illinois died of starvation, giving the historic park its name, Starved Rock. I recently joined Vandwellers' Facebook page and asked you guys to send me some of your vintage rides. My favorite vans have a boxy characteristic look, which is something I see a lot in vintage cars. These are some of the coolest rides I saw. Savannah Bellfire's Painted Cutie Ziggy. Doug Nelson showed us his 1993 Chevrolet P30 step van. It runs on unleaded gas and gets 9 to a gallon. I love the panel look in this van and the boxy face. Daryl Arthur showed his 1983 Dodge Explorer. Van dwellings can be very cozy, especially this one, which is a Class B RV. Smiley Stove showed us the inside of his 89 Dodge. Joey T shared his VW. Kevin Strickland's 89 E150. Keith Wilson and his puppers in his 1977 Chevy G30 high-top camper van. Christopher Koenig with a 87 Ford E150 Club Wagon. Did you guys check out the solar panel though? Mary Robertson's 69 Chevy G10. Still under construction, but the inside is complete. Let's send her some positive vibes for this baby to get on the road. Who says vintage vans can't be a good dwelling? Three middle-aged women drove from their homes in the Chicago suburbs for a 4-day holiday at Starved Rock State Park. The 3 friends, Mildred Lindquist, Lillian Edding, and Frances Murphy, had been anxious to hang out since one of the girls spent the whole winter taking care of her husband after a heart attack. Since she was cooped up for so long, they were all looking forward to several days of hiking, birdwatching, and spending time outdoors. Frances Murphy had parked her gray station wagon. She and her friends unloaded their luggage. They registered for 2 rooms, dropped off their bags, and then ate lunch. After, they remarked to one of the staff members that it was a beautiful day for a hike, and they left carrying a camera and a small pair of binoculars. They walked away from the lodge wearing rubber galoshes. The path was covered with a light snow. They walked and slipped, taking pictures of each other. Eventually, they came to the dead end of St. Louis Canyon, where steep, rocky walls framed a majestic frozen waterfall. The 3 women were only 1 mile away from the lodge. That night, George Edding telephoned his wife at the lodge. She promised to call him, but when he didn't receive a phone call, he decided to place his own. He was told by the staff on duty that his wife was not available. The staff figured she went out somewhere and told him to call the next morning. Tuesday morning, Edding phoned again. He asked to speak to his wife, and an employee mistakenly told the worried man that the three women had been seen at breakfast and were out at the time. That night, a late winter storm hit the Illinois Valley. In St. Louis Canyon, several inches of snow covered up what will soon be evidence to a brutal crime. George Edding phoned again on Wednesday, but his wife and her friends could not be located. At his insistence, employees entered the women's rooms and found that the beds and bags were untouched. A quick check of the parking also showed that Francis' station wagon had not been moved. That was when panic and dreadful thoughts entered Edding's mind. His wife and her friends had been missing for more than 40 hours. When I went hiking, I was unaware of the history. I didn't know that this very ledge was where the three women were found, under the ravine.
Hiking is about going to places you've never been before. Alright, let's go. Awesome, look at that.
Edding telephoned his longtime friend, Virgil W. Peterson, who was the operating director of the Chicago Crime Commission. His friend contacted the state police and other law enforcement agencies, and within minutes, word of the missing woman had reached LaSalle County Sheriff's Office, and they began organizing search parties. Bill Danley caught wind and drove to the park. He noticed a boy running across the icy ravine toward the road. Other kids were shouting that bodies had been found on one of the trails. He then called the lodge, then the newspapers, to report the discovery. In a matter of minutes, the story was flashing countrywide. It was March 14, 1960. Their bloody corpses found mutilated side by side, partially covered with snow. They were on their backs, under a small ledge, and their lower clothing had been torn. Each of them had been beaten viciously on the head, and two of the bodies were tied together with heavy white twine. They were covered in blood, and their exposed legs were blackened with bruises. The snow covered most of the evidence left behind from the struggle, which then had to be slowly removed. When it was, signs of a violent struggle were revealed. Miss Murphy's camera was found 10 feet from the victims. Its leather case was smeared with blood and its strap was broken. They also found bloody binoculars, which, as stated before, was one of the items they took on their hike. A short distance away, there was a frozen tree limb that was streaked with blood. The snow beneath it was covered with blood. It was realized that the women had been killed deeper in the canyon, and then their bodies had been dragged and positioned under the rock ledge. The bodies remained in place for hours until pathologists and the state crime lab officials could arrive. When the women were autopsied, they looked obviously molested, but in the cold and limitations of medical techniques at the time failed to find any evidence of rape. The doctors were able to determine the time of death, placing it shortly after they had enjoyed lunch at the lodge. The investigation moved forward very slowly, and people began to get more and more antsy. Doors that were never locked before were now secured. Hardware stores experienced a run on new deadbolts, and sporting goods stores saw guns vanish from their cases at an alarming rate. An attorney, Warren, decided to use his own money and take one last go at this case. He bought a microscope and began intently conducting a study of the twine. Research revealed that there were two kinds of twine used, a 20-ply cord and a 12-ply one. With this information, he sought out help to follow the lead. He chose two men who would only report to him, two men who would not leak the details of what he was doing to the newspapers. The search started at Starved Rock Lodge. Within minutes of searching the kitchen, they found both twines used to bind the murder victims. They had without question been taken from the supply in the lodge's kitchen. Just as Warren had always suspected, the killer either worked at or had access to the park's lodge. Faced with the fact that all of the lodge employees had been given polygraph tests and had passed, Warren wondered if the tests had been accurate. He decided that it was time to run some of his own tests. Hiring a specialist from a prominent Chicago firm, Warren recalled all of the employees who had worked during the week of the murder. One by one, they came to a small cabin located near the lodge and again submitted to an exam. The first dozen or so were quickly cleared, and Warren and the deputies wondered if they might have been wasting their time. Then Bill Dummett brought in a former dishwasher named Chester Otto Wedger, and everything changed. When Wedger's polygraph test was completed, Warren noticed that the examiner's face had gone pale. As soon as Wedger left the cabin, the technician ended months of endless leads and wasted time. He turned to Warren and the two deputies and quietly stated, "That's your man." Wedger, 21, was a slight, small man with a wife and two young children. He had worked at the park until that summer, when he resigned to go into business with his father as a house painter. Dummett remembered the man's name from an earlier police report, but he had never made much of an impression on the investigators. Warren intensified the investigation of the man, and strangely, Wedger happily cooperated with him. He surrendered a piece of a buckskin jacket that he had owned, so that some suspicious dark stains on it could be examined. It later turned out to be human blood, but in 1960 it could not be typed and matched to a specific victim. Warren also asked Wedger to submit to further polygraph tests, and again Wedger agreed. He was given an entire series of tests, and he failed all of them. After they realized his jacket was stained with blood, he was under constant surveillance by the police. When they looked into his past, they uncovered that Dummett came across a reported rape and robbery that took place about a mile from Starved Rock in 1959. With Warren's approval, he approached the young female victim with a stack of mugshots. As she slowly sorted through them, she began to scream as she came across the face of Chester Wedger. With the positive identification, Warren could have easily ordered Wedger arrested, but was forced to wait. He was running for re-election as defense attorney, and if he booked Wedger on rape and murder charges before the election, other defense attorneys would have said it was a stunt to retain his job. After he lost the re-election, he went back to the case. Wedger was questioned and confronted. Finally, when he was exhausted, he stopped mid-sentence and asked to see his family. A police car was dispatched to his home in Oglesby. In his official statement the next day, Deputy Hess stated, "When Bill stepped out of the back room in the state's office to show Mr. and Miss Wedger to the door so they could go home, I could see that something was bothering Chester. I asked Chester, 'Why don't you tell me about it? There are just two of us here. Just tell me about it,' he said. 'All right, I did it. I got scared. I tried to grab their pocketbook. They fought and I hit them.' The pocketbook that Wedger claimed that he tried to take was actually Miss Murphy's camera. During the confession, when he was asked why he had dragged the bodies under the overhang in St. Louis Canyon, Wedger said that he had spotted a small plane flying low over the park. Wedger said that he was afraid that it was a state police plane, so he moved the bodies so they could not be seen from above. A few days later, the flight over the park was confirmed by the pilot's testimony and logbook. Wedger confessed several more times to the murders over the next few days and even reenacted killings for the crowd of policemen and reporters at the canyon. Then suddenly, after his first meeting with his court-appointed attorney, Wedger changed his story and stated that he was innocent of all the charges. Wedger claimed that Dummett and Hess had coerced a confession from him by threatening him with a gun. He had lied in his confession, but had been so scared that he signed the papers anyways. Wedger also said that Dummett had fed him the information about the airplane. He claimed to be in Oglesby at the time of the killings. On March 4, almost exactly a year after the murders, the jury brought back a guilty verdict for Chester Wedger. On the day of his 22nd birthday, he was sentenced to a term of life imprisonment.
Look, Thalia.
You're better off staying away from all the green shit.
A little stream.
Oh, pretty.
If you guys were wondering about the Toyota van in my intro, here's a few clips of me sanctioning it. Gonna purify the car with my handmade smudge stick. What will I do with the Toyota van? Will it be my official tour van? Stay tuned to Vintage Cruis'N USA to find out. Mystix out. Oh, one more thing. I recently decided to create a Vintage Cruis'N USA Facebook page. So, anyone who has vintage items can be featured on the next show of Vintage Cruis'N USA. And you'll be able to stay updated with the show.